A very good evening, everyone. So we are back again with our continuing session of the accounts Excel import. So I'm sharing my screen. So before starting with the session, I would like to have a recall on what we discussed in our last two sessions on the accounts Excel import. So let's have a quick recap. So in the phase one part, we learned how to import the the bill details via Excel import for a party. Next was the cost center details. Next was the GST breakup. We learned how to update the GST breakup in our Excel sheet so that it can give me proper results in my GST reports. Next came the voucher properties. Then in the phase two part, we learned how to import the bank description for the bank entries or the bank ledgers that were updated in our books of accounts. Then came the reference details, which was a part of a debit note and credit note. Then which it resulted for the data in our GSTR to be matching or two-way matching. Then we learned how to import the Excel with the BRS date so that we can immediately import the data with the reconciliation done. And the iron information that was passed on in case if the iron was done before the entry was done in our financial module, we can just have a track of the iron number in the books of accounts. This is usually used in the implementation phase. Next, today we'll be learning how to update the entries with the SEZ selection. Now, SEZ selection or the invoice type, we have two options coming in, which is the sale to SEZ ISD interstate tax transfer. For the journal or the expense part, we use one more option as ITC, which I'll be showing how to import via Excel. And then we'll be learning how to import the entries with the FX details via Excel import. So with this, we'll be learning one more thing that would be just beside our SEZ part, there is a GST party part. So we'll be learning how to update the GST party in our Excel import. And then accordingly, my entries will be reflecting in our books of accounts, and accordingly, the data will be reflecting in our GST report, and it will help us in our GST filing purpose. As per the regular process, we need to go to transactions, import, export, and import. So once you're there in the import screen, you will be finding an option of accounts voucher. And herein you will be finding the template, which I showed you earlier as well. And accordingly, you just need to download the Excel template file over here. And accordingly, the data needs to be fed in for importing the data with SEZ and FX entries. So I've prepared one Excel file, which I'll go through. So this is an Excel file which I have prepared. So the basics that we discussed last time is as it is, how to update the voucher serial number, voucher date, voucher number, voucher type, all are as it is the way we learned. So what extra fields are getting added over here? These are the fields which are getting extra added over here in case of SEZ. And in case of GST party, in case if you want to avail GST, but the company is not registered and is not having its own GSTI, but you are running one more company which is GST registered, so you can avail the GST via updating the entries in your GST party ka field. So these are the two new columns we'll be discussing today in our today's session. So over here in SEZ part column, in the P column, you are finding four types, which is reflecting over here, which is Y, N, C, ISD. So over here, ISD stands for the entries which is pertaining to SEZ and are marked ISD interstate tax transfer. Then comes the ITC ineligible tax, which is only and only applicable in the case of expenses and not in the cases of income. For that, we'll be using the the alphabet as C, denoting ITC. And for sale to SEZ type of transactions, we'll be using simply as Y, that okay, SEZ is applicable for those kind of transactions. And in case if you're trying to import a mixed entries or mixed data at the time of Excel import, you can just simply give as M that SEZ is not at all applicable in this particular entry. So what did I do? I have updated four types of transactions, which is easy peasy, very simple. I have debited one party ledger and credited the income ledger. The GSTN that was supposed to be updated, which is belonging to my business, place in my books of accounts. And the only difference over here is the SEZ part or the SEZ marking, which I'm doing in my P column. And rest of the things are as it is. So for first three transactions, I have not updated any GST part, but for the one which I have not availed the SEZ, I have updated the GST part as per the regular process. I just need to update the details in my GST sheet as well, so the data is updated correctly. And we need to make sure that the bill is, if the bill is enabled in our party ledgers, then the bill details are updated correctly in my VBill sheet. In case if the cost centers are enabled in our expense or income ledgers, then accordingly the cost center, the details in my VCC sheet also needs to be updated. In case if it is not updated, you can just skip this particular part over here. And bank, since I'm not using any ledgers in the bank, so I'm not going to update any bank description over here. And the same goes for the voucher property. So let's see if I import the Excel file, how does it reacts over here? So I'll go to browse, accounts import for invoice, open and upload. So we'll wait until it gets imported in the books of accounts. Till then, if there is any clarity which is required in case whatever we discussed right now, then you can just come up with your queries and accordingly I'll answer them one by one. So the moment, till the entry gets imported, I'll show you the transaction screen where this option is reflecting in my voucher sheet. These are the fields which reflects at the time of import. Since I'm selected the journal voucher type, so I'm getting three options over here, which is sale to SEZ, ITC, which is ineligible tax credit, which is applicable in the case of expense, and the IST, interstate tax transfer. When I select the voucher type as invoice, which we usually use for the income part, so we are getting two options, which is sale to SEZ and the IST, interstate tax transfer. So all my 4 transactions have been imported in my books of accounts. So let's check after the import part, how does it looks like. So first was the invoice nature entry, for which I selected the IST type. So over here, it got automatically selected as IST, interstate tax transfer. All the things remains as it is. Next came the ITC, ineligible tax, which was applicable for the expense ledgers. So over here, it got selected the way we updated in our import file. The third one came to sale to SEZ, which was a simple SEZ transaction entries. So it got selected over here. And the fourth one was very simple transactions without any selection of SEZ. I just updated it as in, or even if you leave it as blank, it will consider as in. So no SEZ has been marked in this kind of transactions. So any queries till this? So accordingly, we'll be just proceeding for our FX type of transactions. Moving on with the FX details. So let's check how the FX details helps in. So in case if you're supposed to import the data with the FX transactions, so let's check how RealBooks is helping us in importing the data with the FX details. Okay, the same Excel file, all the things again remains the same. The extra field which is getting added is the J, K, and L column, which is denoting the FX type, whether the FX is applicable for those kind of transaction or not, which is yes or no, Y and N. Then comes the currency column, and then comes the currency rate column. So over here, just one thing which needs to be kept in our mind, like if I go to my transaction screen, over here, we get an option of foreign exchange. If we click over here, the toggle button gets enabled. And accordingly, you get an option of selecting the USD, the correct currency over here and the rate over here. So we are updating exactly this data in our Excel import. But since over here, at the time of selection, we select the short name of currency, but at the time of our Excel import, we need to make sure that we give the entire exact currency name, which is updated in our books of accounts. For example, in this case, if I have selected the currency as USD in my transaction screen, so let's quickly go to the masters of currency, which is view over here. This is the symbol of USD dollar, which is USD, and the currency name over here is US dollar. So over here in my Excel sheet, we just need to make sure that we are giving the currency name and not the symbol, because if you give the symbol in the Excel at the time of import, it will quickly give you an error that there is having some mismatch in the currency name at the time of import. So over here in this transaction, I have just given a debit and a credit part over here. I am not updating any SEZ transactions in my FX over here. In case if applicable, you can update it with the SEZ part. So I have updated a debit and a credit part, and over here I have enabled FX for both the entries and updated the currency as US dollar with a completely different rate for both the transactions. One is with 89.10 and the other rate is 78.10. Again, the business place is mandatory. You need to make sure that you're updating the correct business place at the time of Excel import. And rest are the same. In case, you can always import the data with a combination of what we discussed in our last two sessions. Over here, I'm focusing only in the FX transactions. So these are the two entries that I'm going to update with the 3 additional fields of FX, currency, and currency rate. We need to make sure that we have updated the V-bill sheet correctly, because the bill is enabled in the party. We need to make sure the V-bill sheet is updated correctly. If the cost center is enabled for your income and expense ledger, then the same is applicable, else you can ignore this. GST is not applicable over here because I'm not using any GST ledgers in my voucher sheet. Same goes with the bank's sheet and the voucher property sheet. So let's check how does it reflect at the time of import. So we'll quickly go to transactions, import, export, and import. We'll click on accounts voucher, browse, accounts import for FX, open, and upload. So we'll wait for a couple of minutes till the entry gets imported in our books of accounts. Till then, if there is any query or question related to any of the feature that we discussed today, you can come up. Also, you can consider, we will be considering the queries and the questions which were discussed in our last 2 sessions relating to accounts voucher import. So I'll be glad to answer all of them.
Ma'am, can you please explain the SEZ part once again?
Yeah, sure. So before starting with the SEZ part, I would just like to show you the way the data which I imported right now with respect to the FX transactions. So I am opening those transactions which I imported with relation to the FX. Okay, so at the time of Excel preparation, we are updating the values, the FX values, and not the INR values. You just need to make sure that. So in my Excel sheet, I updated the value as 5,000 and 5,280. So over here, my FX amount has been considered as 5,000, and the value or the rate which I updated over here, it's multiplying the INR value with the rate, and it's showing the value of the INR in my debit and credit column. So don't get confused with in both of these things. So coming back to the SEZ part. Okay. So at the time of SEZ types of import, we are having 4 types of options over here at the time of accounts voucher import, wherein we can update the value either for the IST. IST stands for the interstate tax transfer. And then comes the C, which is the ITC, ineligible tax applicable for the expense ledgers. Then comes the sale to SEZ. This is a simple enabling of SEZ type of transactions. And the 4th one, which is by default as N, that means the SEZ is not at all applicable for your transactions. So you just need to make sure that you have updated the voucher sheet, V-bill, GST, bank as it is the way you are supposed to be updating it as per our last 2 sessions that we discussed. The only difference that you're doing is you have just need to update these symbols over here. Whether this is an ISD type of transaction, whether this is an ITC, ineligible tax type of transaction, or whether it is a simple sale to SEZ type of transactions. If you give these kind of options or the symbols, which is reflecting in your P column header, the moment you update these transactions this way, after import in your books of accounts, you will be finding that the data has been imported in your books the way you have given a command in your Excel sheet. Since for my first entry with a value of 5,000, I updated it as IST. So automatically my selection, instead of select SEZ to IST, it's reflecting as IST interstate tax transfer. And the same goes for the rest of 2 transactions as well. So it's auto selected. I mean, at the time of import, usually what we did, we were not using the SEZ part. If you're not giving anything, automatically it will be selecting the select SEZ ITC. When that means the SEZ is not applicable for this kind of transactions. And accordingly, you won't be able to view the reports and the datas in your GSTR report. So at the time of import itself, you can define which category of SEZ the entry is belonging to, and accordingly you can import. Hope this answers your query. If not, then you can just come up with your query once again. So any questions related to the SEZ part or the GST party part? I think I've shown for the GST party part as well. I mean, in my Excel sheet, I updated the Zomato as the party part. Over here, this should be usually different because I cannot use the same party in my GST over here. So if I'm using, say, suppose Arundhati Enterprises in my party and want to give the GST party as Zomato Limited, then accordingly my entry will get posted the way we are commanding in my Excel file. So this was all about our FX and GST party and the SEZ type. If any query relating to the entire session of the accounts voucher Excel import, you can always come up to us. You can either ask us right now, or you can just write down our the mail, or you can reach out to our support team. And accordingly, we'll be happy to welcome all the queries and answer it one by one. So thank you so much all for joining today's session.